Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about Office Hours at officehours.global. You can find a way to join. Once you've joined, you can be part of the conversation. You become one of our producers that is guiding the show with the questions that you ask and your votes. The first hour is generally something that, general discussion about things that we think are important. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, sorry. Second hour is what we think is something that we've decided to specialize in. And today we're going to talk about the business of live streaming. There's a lot of us that have kind of been forced into that. And so we're going to talk about what it takes and things to consider. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about what we call the Belfast method. This is a process where we're slowly taking over actual physical events in different locations. We've been doing it in Belfast. That's how it got its name. But Todd Reynolds is going to be our next guinea pig. We're going to have Todd Reynolds. People are going to go in and run his switcher and other things. And so we're going to play with that a little bit coming up. But we're going to talk about what we've learned so far. Saturday, we have education. We don't stream that. That's a date from 8 to 10. It's an incredible conversation about education. At 10, we're going to do the Belfast method actually. So Friday, we're going to talk about what we've learned. 10 o'clock on Saturday, we're actually going to do it. At noon, we're going to hang out with Damayanti Gajar in South Africa. We're going to learn how to make some new food online together. It's really fun, and the food is really good. So I would highly recommend it. And then at 2 o'clock, the remotes are going to talk more in detail. We had an hour where we kind of talked in general about it, but at 2 o'clock on Saturday, Pacific Standard Time, we're going to really talk in detail about what it took to put the songs together and the video. So stay tuned for that. All right. Let's jump into the questions. And who is our question reader? Is it Courtney? All right, Courtney. Let's go ahead and take it away.
Yes, the part of Bill Davis will be played by Courtney Gooden. All right, this morning, first up is Tony Mobley from Newman, Georgia. It says the cloud production of Conversations with Tony Mobley went from 1080p to 4K last night. Was there a technology change, or was it the same infrastructure?
Go ahead, Jonas.
We didn't change anything big on the technology. It was just more testing because we haven't done on that specific instances. We haven't done 4K before. But it was surprising that we were still able to keep it for the encode under 30%, for the production machine under 60%. And I don't have the final build for the traffic yet, but it doesn't seem too bad.
Next question.
This one comes in from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel, he asks, what camera settings typically need to be adjusted after putting a camera behind a teleprompter?
Go ahead, Stuart.
The only thing you need to worry about, unless Courtney knows of any other secrets that we need to deal with, is the exposure level, because putting a half mirrored piece of glass in will cut out some of your light that's reaching your sensor. So either open your iris or get your lighting guy to up the amount of lighting, which is probably the better solution, because you will set your iris for your depth of field for however you wish to, like what emotion you want the scene to set.
Courtney, did you have something to add to that?
The only other thing I might think of is that make sure you got the glass in the right way. It is a first surface mirror, and if you have it in backward, you'll see a double reflection. So check that. You can just touch it with the point of a pin or something, and if the pinpoint actually touches its reflection, it's in the right way. And if you see a little bit of gap in there, it's the wrong way. And also make sure that your monitor brightness isn't turned up too high, because if you're in a low light situation, it can cause flare into the lens because that monitor is facing up into the lens of the camera.
Next question.
All right, this one, hello. This one comes in from Diego Nunes in in Barcelona, Spain. Recommendation for a good sounding, reliable, inexpensive USB headset, one muff, to use with Unity Client on a PC. Suggested Sennheiser PC7, and the client wants something even cheaper.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I don't have a specific recommendation, but I'd take a look at the options coming from Logitech. Though the words good sounding and reliable don't really go with something that's less than $20 US.
Yeah, I mean, $20 or $30 is a low number for a headset. So I wouldn't go any lower than that. I mean, I think that at that point your client doesn't care about the comms. Go ahead, Jonas.
I would maybe say the headset you already have for your phone and use it on your phone. I've seen that be pretty reliable, and then don't use push to talk and use everything wired, no cheap Bluetooth headphones, especially.
Yeah.
Wired ones work okay.
Next question.
All right, this one comes in from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. Yesterday's Zoom audio discussion, please clarify the damage done by a phone call in. Would it hurt a musical mono feed or only messes with the stereo?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Jeff Woodgren and Greg Curda mentioned that they also sense that the codec must be changing and lowering the bitrate as well, aside from the stereo summing.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, exactly. Our testing was around the stereo nature. You could definitely tell it was collapsed, and there was a perceived difference in the sort of dynamic range. So it probably would need to be tested with a good mono signal and see what it produces. But I think it is a changing codec.
Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McCrae here on the panel and from Dallas, Texas. He says, Linux seems to be able to flip its display output horizontally or vertically with a simple command line switch. Would that make Raspberry Pi an ideal teleprompter device? This option does actually flip, not just rotate.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Yes, and if you would use something like OBS Ninja, who has been, there's a small version for the Pi, you could, in theory, even do it remotely and just send out a Pi with a screen.
Go ahead, Courtney.
This is fine if you're running your own teleprompter. However, if you're running teleprompter for somebody else, it's not going to work for you because both screens will be flipped, and you need to be able to read it right side out if you're mirroring the screen.
Next question. Oh, can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry, mouse fade. Coming in from David Pashkin in Miami, Florida. Alex, on Macbreak this week, you took the brunt of the heated discussion about Apple addressing perceived or real flaws. You were composed and professional in the entire time. Any suggestions on how not to get caught up in the heat of the moment?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think very important to remember when you get stuck in one of these heated conversations, and you see, I think this in Alex sometimes, is people don't think, people respond in the way a situation occurs to them. And you cannot, in the middle of a heated conversation, fix the way something occurs to somebody. So once you've stated your point, at some point you have to disengage and come back out of the heated conversation and engage, understand how it occurs to them, understand why it occurs to you a certain way, and try and find a common ground. But you're not going to fix it in the middle of a heated debate.
Go, Jonas.
What I found is really helpful to differentiate between a person and what they are saying in that moment, because sometimes it's like you can't go back, but also it's like I found that many people think of like, oh yeah, that person has that meaning, so it could be all bad, but it's good to differentiate between different meanings that a person has. Also to sometimes just say, we won't agree now, maybe later, but not now.
I'm rarely trying to win the conversation. I'm stating what I think, and I'm testing. I mean, that's how I approach it. You know, I'm never going to agree. In the area that we were discussing in Macbreak, we're never going to agree, and that's totally fine. You know, for me, and I don't have. I think that one of the things that is lost. I won't get into it too much here, but one of the things that's lost in our society is the idea that people could disagree with you, and then they can still be okay. You know, they can still be your friends. You know, they can still be someone that you interact with. I interact with people all over the world from different religions, different politics, different backgrounds, different economic structures, you know, and I've done that in 40 countries, you know, and I've found that they're good people, and sometimes I don't agree with what they have to say, and that's fine. Like, I don't need them to agree on everything with me. And I grew up sparring, you know, so like, my father's a lawyer, so if you disagreed with him, you're going to be cross-examined, you know, and so you get used to it and you get good at it. You know, a lot of times, because I'm a lawyer's son, I'm also setting up the appeal. So a lot of times, if I'm saying things on Macbreak, I'm thinking about them 5 years from now. What I say on Macbreak today is, I told you so 5 years from now, if it goes the way I think it will. And so you know, a lot of times I don't need to win the battle. And I'm also talking to the audience. You know, I'm talking to the audience and making my case in front of the jury, which is not the people that are in the show. You know, like that's the jury is the audience that's making decisions. So you know, I view it in a very wide space. That, you know, I'm not, and I really like Leo, and I really like Andy, and I really like Renee. And Andy and I, the two of us, we're within 50 miles of each other. We'll be at dinner, you know, hanging out, having the same conversation back and forth. And I find people who disagree with me to be very, I find that it helps me think through the problem. You know, so arguing with people who don't see it my way helps me consider the other side, and I either change my mind or I get better at saying it the way I say it. So it's just, you know, it either makes me more, you know, deep in my belief, or if I question my belief, I'll change it. Like I'm not committed to most of my beliefs. And so, you know, I just, they are what I believe right now until I can't tie them together with reality. And so anyway, so I don't, to me, it's, and, you know, after 500 or 700 shows or whatever, it's just a conversation. It's not like it's not you know, we're not sending troops out somewhere, you know, and we're not putting people at, you know, real risk. We're just talking about a phone. So anyway, so that's kind of, you know, that's how I view it. So there's a lot of things that are really important, and it's important to me. It's a good topic to talk about, but I have it in the context of the rest of the world and life and things, and it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, that's how I kind of approach it. Anyway, next question.
Okay, this one coming in from Serge Blondin in Sherbrooke. Does anyone know if using a Sony DSLR as a webcam can damage the sensor in the long run?
Go ahead, Stuart. Stuart.
Yeah, I needed to move a mouse across the screen from where I was switching to where the unmute is. It's using it as a webcam, using it as a camera to film. There's no difference for the sensor itself. Some sensors will age over time, and you might have an hours meter on some of them, but you will find most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras do not. It lasts as long as it lasts, and any one task will not affect that use. The things that will affect the sensor's lifetime is dust, exposure to bright pinpoint light sources. Like if you focus on the sun, you will put a burn on the sensor. And of course, getting it wet. So don't drop your camera in a river, not unless it's a Pentax, because they're water resistant.
And Courtney, your connection's breaking up a little bit. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay, for me, I don't know about the DSLR bit. If you mean the Sony DSLRs, I have no experience of that. If you mean the mirrorless ones, things like the A5100, I've been using the A5100, this one, as my main camera, this here, for almost 3-4 years now, probably 10 hours a day, every day, and I've noticed no difference in it whatsoever. And if you mean the A7 Mark III, I will let you know when my wife lets me steal hers, and I use it for a long time. But the A5100, so the mirrorless, I mean, I literally years, I think 3 or 4 years now, I've been using it every single day, and I've noticed no difference.
And Sam, you can try refreshing your page. Sorry about that. I didn't get the approval in there. Next question.
Okay, I hope I'm not breaking up. I think that was Stuart. And Diogo Nunes from Barcelona, Spain. Sorry, I murdered your name last time. Looking for ideas, installation project, need to track a person's position, XY position in a room, and translate that data into OSC values to pan audio in QLab to multiple loudspeakers. Room size is about 15 by 30 meters, 14 loudspeakers, 7 per side.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I would say if it's only a person on not multiple, as soon as you have multiple, it will get really messy. What you could do is try it optically. Put 2 cameras or however much cameras you need to cover one of the sides. So on both sides, and then run a difference matching in Isadora. So it detects when there's something in a specific slot. Then you can translate that slot for the X coordinate, and then the same thing from the other perspective for the Y coordinate, and send that out over OSC. And you can get it down pretty nearly, but yeah, it might be a budget approach.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this, but I would recommend get in touch with Tlaloc and also Tim McCullough, who has talked about the Mayor sound system that does immersive, and I know that Mayor system can take commands from OSC through OSC. Yeah.
Go ahead, Marty.
So this is typically is done in the reverse, where camera positions want to follow where the audio is coming from, and One Beyond Camera Systems has a processor that will collect audio from a special type of microphone that provides that directional information. Don't know if it can be used in the reverse, but I have come across, and I'll have to look for the link for this, I have come across a system that is used on stage that can detect the direction of an actor on stage and provide audio cues for panning and spatial sound.
The publicly available, the one that if you're willing to give the speaker a fob, a small little tracker in their system, Blacktracks is what you're probably looking for. Blacktracks, and I'll put the URL, it's a bad URL, but it's a good piece of software. So blacktracks.cast-soft.com is probably something you want to check out. That's what they do. That's all they do. Next question.
Another one from Diogo Nunch. Sorry, I'll get it right yet. I'm transcoding a collection of content on DVD using Handbrake for later upload to YouTube. Footage is 576p, so I'm using fast 576p25 preset on Handbrake. Is there any value in upscaling resolution? Any other Handbrake tips?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, when it comes to just purely upscaling, try not to in software if you can avoid it. But also have a look back. It would be about 2-3 months in the office hours videos on the YouTube. You will find a guest from Facebook who was part of the live streaming development there. And she talked us through a lot of tips on doing exactly this sort of thing. I believe the main one was to try and use the NVENC encoder, and she even gave us a set of settings. So that would be a good resource to go and find first.
Fast, generally fast. The fast term means that it's not doing 2 pass on the encode, so it's not going back forward and looking at it and then setting setting the keyframes accordingly. So it is much faster to encode, but know that in high motion areas or a lot of action type things, you'll see some issues around scene breaks and high motion because it didn't go ahead and look at it and then come back and encode it. And so the fast will save you time, but it's not the highest quality if you're doing it for an archive. There are specialized scaling tools that can upgrade these and look pretty good. Handbrake is just FFmpeg with a front end, so it's not going to have those specialized scaling tools in it. So you can look for software that's designed to scale it, and you may get some more resolution out of it, but you won't get it from Handbrake. Next question.
All right, this one comes in from David Brady in New York. Sometime back, Alex demoed or mentioned an alternative software package to Scopebox. Any recollection to the name, and can you elaborate on the pros and cons? Asking for some colleagues.
Go ahead, Jonas.
It probably was no omniscopes, and 2 features that I really like is the customization that you can do, because you can just drag around all the graphs that you want. They have an integration into Resolve, so now when I color grade my footage, I can look at their graphs and learn how they correlate to what I do. And then also they have NDI in and output. So what you can do with Zoom Room's NDI, for example, is you take the NDI in and output it again to the virtual webcam, and that way you have a Zoom Room that can do your scopes for you without any OBS or something.
Yeah, no omniscope is what we've begun to use a lot of. Now, I will say that some folks within our group have said that the scope box, there still to be some accuracy issues between it, where scope box is seen as more accurate than omniscope. I think it has to do with a setting. You got to make sure that you're doing full swing. You have a choice between full swing and video as far as how the scopes go, and I think that might just be that idiosyncrasy, but we have to test it against some hardware scopes to make sure. What I will say is that the interface is a lot lighter than Scopebox, and so it's just easier to set up something and save it out. And every time you open it, it just is what you want in full screen, and it puts the stuff together there. So I have found it to be great. It has a couple more audio scopes than Scopebox, which is something that I've been a proponent for Scopebox for a long time, to incorporate more audio scopes so that we have one app that does everything, as opposed to having two apps opened to do all of those things. And so that's but I think that for that reason, the additional audio scopes, the customization of the interface, and a little bit more repeatability of it, it's just a little less mysterious when we set it up, has led us to use OmniScope more often than Scopebox right now, but we've used Scopebox for a long time too. And so with minor changes, we would be happy with either one. Next question.
Coming in from a young man named Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. What are the likely causes of a camera sensor developing a blue cast over a period of a couple of weeks?
Go ahead, Richard.
This drove me nuts in one of our cameras recently, and the only thing I could find to do it was the black shading needed recalibrating, and that solved it straight away. Not sure if that's exactly what's happening with yours, but that solved ours.
And I'm not sure who's moving the questions over, so I'm not gonna, but make sure not to push the business of live stream ones into the host section.
I just saw that. Sorry, Alex.
Next question.
That is also me. Okay. Coming up from David Peskin in Miami, Florida. Yesterday on TWIG, Craig Newmark joined on a Tula Mic. Does anyone have any experience with these? Any thoughts?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So this is a microphone that has internal memory, so you can record while you're doing whatever you're doing, and then of course you can use that recording for different things. I've always wanted to have that for a microphone, because then you could actually do a podcast, send the recording to the person, and then they could do post editing from there. As for the quality, I don't know. It's a table mic. It's very small, so it's going to be way away from your mouth. So there could be a lot of room noise and very hard to do any type of post processing on.
It's really interesting. Interesting mic. I have not seen that one before. Next question.
Coming in from Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart. At John, how did your test go with Hyperslow?
John?
I'm not sure if he was meaning me or other John, but I do have a HyperDeck story. I have the brand new one, and I put in media that I recorded on my old one that I exchanged in, and it locked up. So I had to get the media, the approved media, and then format it on the drive itself, and then it's operational. Then I encoded an H265, and it only plays out about one frame every 5 seconds. So I'm going to re-encode using Blackmagic Resolve today, and I'll let you know how that goes.
I've never used H264 or H265 as a playback, so that'll be something that I'd be interested in. We always use ProRes, typically LT, HQ if we're doing, it's LT, HQ if we are doing HDR, and then 444 if we're doing key fill. But those are the three that we use, but I've never used the H264. John Barker?
Yeah, typical case of too many Johns.
Yeah.
That's my whole life. Oh, Hyperslow, I've been using that. I tested it for an event last week. I had everything prepped. It lets you turn a HyperDeck into an instant replay system. I had everything prepped, tested, everything worked as expected, and we never ended up using it, which is classic. What I will say is, and either Jeff or John, whenever I mentioned it a few weeks ago, they said HyperDeck's not made for that, and that's totally fair. It's certainly not instant to do replay. It's more of a collection of highlights that you can use a little bit later, because the time it takes to go from record mode to playback mode on a HyperDeck is just way too slow for a live sporting event. So it's fair. It's not used for that, but it is useful, this app, and it does unlock some of those sort of capabilities for sure.
Can you use it as just a playback controller for the HyperDeck? Could you use it just without it recording? It's just I've got a bunch of files in there that I want to play out.
You probably could, but I think the interface has been so specifically designed for a certain use case, so I wouldn't try to go that direction, I don't think.
Right. Interesting. Next question.
Coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia. Does the ATEM Constellation 8K offer cropping of 8K source into multiple regions of interest and appear as its own camera source?
Go ahead, Jonas.
If it has the same DVE key as then the ATEM Mini, you can do cool stuff like this by just using the DVE. And if it's in 8K, you can actually crop in, but I don't think that the issue you'll run into is you can't input 8K and then run it on 1080p and then crop in, because it will always convert it before the DVE. So you will always lose quality when you zoom in.
Yeah, I don't. So I'm assuming that what you're talking about is an 8K source that is then in a 4K, let's just say a 4K stream. And you said, yeah, you're right, that it'll get converted on the way in. So what Jonas, I think, was talking about, it'll get converted to whatever file size you have, or whatever the switcher is set to. So if you set it to 1080p, it's going to be 1080p by the time it hits the processor. Same, I think that's what Jonas was alluding to there. So yeah, so it'll be converted that way, and you won't be able to get anything out of it. Next question.
This one coming in from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. It says, I just got a projector with an HDbaseT connector. Does anyone still use this way of connecting?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I looked at the question and I assumed he meant a BNC style plug, but looking up the HDbaseT, it comes up as an Ethernet one. So I might be wrong, but if it is, it's an older projector with analog, or it's a newer projector with SDI. So yes, those connectors are still used.
Go ahead, Marty.
HDbaseT is a distribution network for video and audio. You have to have special network switches. It's a one-to-one. I believe it's a one-to-one, so it's not one-to-many. It's a one-to-one connection from sender to receiver, but can go over Ethernet using certain switches. So it's something you have to plan in your facility to use widespread. Otherwise, it's not really worth it.
Next question.
Coming in from Guy Cochran in Seattle. What are some ways we can remotely control a PTZ camera?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Oh, I'm sorry. So a remote control of PTZ camera, you can definitely use a Stream Deck with Companion, and some people have been doing it successfully from another location. And you don't even need the Stream Deck. You can just use Companion straight up, so you can do that.
Go ahead, Jonas.
You could either forward the Whisker protocol over Streamweaver if you have a controller on the other end, or if it's a web interface, you can forward that using Cloudflare Access or a VPN.
Doug?
I've worked many times for OneFF using an Xbox controller, controlling a remote camera.
Next question.
All right, this one coming in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Has anyone had a presenter want to use Keynote live to come in for a broadcast? Any pitfalls to avoid?
We've actually used it here, and so I'm assuming you're talking about Keynote. Well, the question is where you're talking about Keynote live, like it's live into the feed, or if you're talking about Keynote live, this feature. The Keynote live feature means that you have a keynote that you're following another keynote. So keynote somewhere in the world, the two of them are, someone shares it with you, and then as they go through it, it will automatically update. And what it's doing is it's caching all of that graphics, and everything else to your computer. So it's very smooth. It's not like watching a video. And so what's great about the Keynote Live, the feature, is that you can, it's a really high quality version. It's not like a screen share of their presentation. And they're going through it. They see the high quality version, and you see the high quality version as it inserts. And so we did this a little bit in the past with a couple of the presentations, and it worked seamlessly. So we haven't had any issues. I can't say that we would never have any issues. I haven't used it heavily that way, but it's been very successful at doing that. In fact, it would probably be my choice if I had a remote speaker and I knew that all the speakers were using Keynote. I would absolutely use Keynote Live to tie their graphics back into what I was doing. So yeah, it's a good. The one thing that's hard about Keynote in general, when you use it in a presentation, is you can't reorder the slides. You can't move things around. Like you have to go out of presentation mode to do those things. So that's the one challenge, is that you're in edit mode or you're in presentation mode, but you can't, for a lot of reasons, can't do both. Next question.
Okay, this one coming in from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And here on the panel, can the cell data service provided through a LiveU be used for other data services like tethering a laptop?
Not that I know of. It's been something that's been requested a lot. You can upload files later from it, so it'll do a file transfer service, but you can't, that I know of, use it for general IP connections. It's really designed to, and it's licensed. I think a lot of that has to do with how you're using data and how it's being used, and how they're licensing the cell, because they're managing all the costs and contracts with cell providers. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, the 800 now has a data bridge option that allows you to make it a Wi-Fi hotspot.
Okay.
So you can their use cases, they send it to celebrities' homes for Zooms.
And that means that now I'm curious, when it does that hotspot, do you know if it tunnels back to the server?
I don't think so. Cool. It does an IP bridge which tunnels back to the server, but the data bridge I think is I think it's using the cellular data rather than tunneling back, but I can double check it.
It'd be really interesting because yours is newer than the one that I used. So I had a 600 and you have an 800, so that must be a new feature. But the interesting thing about that is if they did tunnel all the way back and they was getting the internet connection from your box that you have on the receiver end, it means that you would basically have a implicit or an explicit VPN between the two, and that would be super useful for controlling other things and everything else on the far end. So, but yeah, I don't know. We'll have to do some more research. Next question.
Coming in from someone with 3 initials, JHB in New York. Looking for a budget amp to put between my mixer main XLR output and a set of passive speakers.
Rupert?
So by no means for like critical listening, but if I have an output and I need to get some noise going into some speakers, I can use the Pile amplifiers, little just small desktop ones. They're budget and they just get some audio going through.
Go ahead, Marty.
Radio Design Labs, rdlnet.com. They will have very small amplifiers that can take 24 volts.
Next question.
From Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, here on the panel. According to Insider.com, Google is planning to build its own semiconductor chips to power its Chromebooks. Might we see some capability boosts in the Chromebook world?
I don't think it's the processor that's holding back the Chromebook. It's the OS. so I think that's the challenge with. I have to live with Chromebooks with my kids going to school, and the functional way that it works is just painful. So it's, I think that if you're just doing Google Docs, I think it'd probably be fine. But there's so many drivers that are missing. There's so many processes that are missing. I don't know how they fix that. It's a really very constrained system that is very difficult to work with. And I think my kids would drown them in the pond if they could. Next question.
All right. From Georgie Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C., John Barker, how can H2R Graphics be used with vMix?
Go ahead, John.
So the current released version would be via a screen scrape in vMix. But if you hold tight a little bit longer, the new version is coming out soon. And you can screen scrape it as well, but it's all URL based instead. So while it works just fine as before, it's all like a URL over your network. And you can open that up in a browser, or you can open that browser URL in vMix instead and get a proper transparent background. So I've been saying for months now, it's coming soon, but it is really very close to being ready.
So that is a HTML5 page that's delivering that?
Exactly.
So that means you could do that with an Elemental as well. In AWS in the cloud, you could actually, because it keys with an HTML5.
There's a few things I need to just tweak. Me and Jonas have been chatting about that and testing some stuff before, but there's a few things I need to tweak, and otherwise, yeah, that's possible, definitely.
That's really interesting. George?
John, how much customization are we going to be able to add to that, those lower thirds and so forth overall?
So at first, I will keep things kind of tight just as I go into release, but I built this sort of themes builder here, so you can actually decide what you want things to look like and stuff like that. So I'm kind of starting small, opening up some features, and then I'll be adding more as time goes on and adding back in like custom CSS and a lot more control in the future.
And you can, I assume you could do bugs, not just lower thirds. You could key a bug.
Exactly. So right now I have, let me see if I show you that. All of the current graphics are lower thirds, messages, time, images. I also have a web page that you can overlay. So I've been using like Play.it through H2R Graphics output. So you only need to use one input into your switcher and stuff like that. And I'll probably add more, and YouTube comments as well is one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, do you have a countdown clock?
There are time, and you can choose time of day or countdown 10 seconds or whatever you want there. So I've, yeah.
You do a countdown of like 20 minutes?
No, only 10 seconds. Yeah, of course.
20 minutes would be super useful. Just saying, maybe 30.
It's possible.
Random, like put it in and give it a target. Yeah, interesting. Because a lot of times, you know, you have a bunch of graphics. So we talk about opens. You have the worst open that you can do. Like if you want to start your stream early. I mean, that's most big streams. We all start them at least 20 minutes early. You know, and that is to warm the edge. That is, we're talking about live later, but that's to warm the edge. It's to prep people in. It's letting people get in there and get settled. It's making sure that nothing's wrong. It's checking audio and video. The worst thing that you can do is put up a still. So that is you'll lose huge amounts of your audience because they don't know what's going on and they just leave. The improvement to that is a countdown clock, because that tells them where it is. It's not very exciting and you may still lose people, but a countdown clock is something there. The next one above that is playing out video, you know, just videos that they can watch and be entertained and everything else before you get to the top of the hour. And then the best way to do it is a pre-show. You know, you have people talking before you have people talking. We do that. So here we have a very long pre-show. It's called it's called after hours into the pre-show of office hours, but office hours literally has a 1 hour pre-show because that helps, you know, sort everything out and get everything worked out. Across almost all of them, except for the still, a countdown clock is useful. And, you know, so you can put a countdown clock into the countdown clock, but you can put it over the videos. And what's really a pain is for you to have to do that in your video production. What's really great is to be able to have it, you know, there. And then the second thing is that if you're doing a pre-show, it's nice to just be able to have it, again, from my perspective, in the Elemental and in the cloud. I can just say, just turn this on and play it down in the corner, you know, would be super useful. Go ahead, John.
So that's something I've been testing. Actually, I can't really show you a good example of it, but in this example, I have Play.it playing the background animated video there, and then H2R Graphics was that timer there you just saw disappear. So I don't have to burn in the time to the video. I have the timer set dynamically, but the video itself is a looping background played by Play.it. So yeah, it's possible.
And the biggest trick that we have there is just making sure we have lots of fonts to use, because now typically when I build countdown clocks, I use the font that they're using for the rest of the graphics, you know, and so that might not be possible, but having lots of fonts is important so that they don't look basic. Anyway, Stuart.
John, firstly, I volunteer as beta tester. Secondly, could you add an option in there that I think people might love, which would be to be able to display either PowerPoint or Keynote natively in that? That would be amazing for those of us who are on PCs and can't access Keynotes without dragging a Mac out to the set. Yep, but I volunteer as beta tester.
Go ahead, Jonas.
And one of the really cool things with that workflow in vMix is I did use it for my streams. So we had multiple people all over the world pushing in comments over that tool and like triggering the countdown. But for cloud productions, it's amazing because you can have a VPN and people just log on to the control. I can have a local preview of what's happening here, and it's great that it's finally been there sometime.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says, what would you think of a second hour with L'acoustics talking about LISA Studio, or maybe it's Lisa Studio? They are marketing it for both live and studio immersive production, and it could be interesting for us.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think that would be cool, and maybe we can reel in some of the crew from Brand Mag's show, Audio Opinion show, to do a office hours takeover.
Who are you talking about again for the opinions?
Yeah, Brian Maddox has a show that he does
Oh, right.
every week or every other week. If we can get that crew in,
Get them in. Yeah.
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just think of it as Brian's show. I forget the name. So I'm sure it's not just his show, but it's how it occurs in my head. Go ahead. Next question.
All right. This is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Does Newtek own the right to their test patterns? Or will any of the new NDI test patterns earn you a YouTube copyright strike?
Go ahead, George.
I've used Sienna generator on YouTube. I haven't had any issues. Like Alex always says, you might, if you push in tone, you might get a strike because that's been used so much on YouTube. But as far as the physical test patterns of itself, no.
And the thing to do is, if you have an extra account that isn't the main account that you're using, push it to it and see what. I do that all the time with live streams. I just push them. You can upload files and it'll tell you whether it's going to get flagged. So you could also just copy the file, and in the upload process, you can check that file to see if it's going to get flagged or not. But you can also, I just stream it, because the streaming tools and the VOD tools are two different they have two different behaviors, and so sometimes you're better off running a stream into a burner account if you can create one to do that. I don't know whether YouTube lets you do much of that anymore, but people like me have like 15 of them, so that we're always using for tests. Next question.
From Rupert McCrae on the panel and in Dallas, Texas, he asks, what is the keyboard and mouse over network solution some panelists are using to span multiple machines?
Go ahead, John.
This was a recommendation by JJ, and I installed it that day, and it's amazing program. I have Basic here. This is Basic, and you can see as I move my mouse to my other screen, it shows you what it's doing here on the console window. But it's super useful for cutting and pasting from machine to machine. I have a Mac as the server, and then a PC and a Raspberry Pi as a client, and I can drag my mouse all the way across. It's the best parlor trick ever.
And what's it called again?
Synergy.
Oh, Synergy. Okay, yeah. I thought you said it was Basic. I was like, I don't know that one. Go ahead, David.
I'm waiting for universal control from Mac. That's going to be a game changer for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that the interesting thing about Synergy is that it is not maybe completely platform agnostic, but very close to it. So it's not just going from something in the same operating system, but literally going between operating systems. Next question.
Coming in from Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana. Jonas, what EC2 instance type do you recommend to run a Pritunl server on?
Jonas?
It depends on your workload. I always overspec. As soon as I start to look for small amounts of money, I start to rethink my workflow where I can completely kill off an instance versus just make everything smaller. I run it on a T2 medium. That's totally overpowered, but I never want to have the issue that my VPN is overloaded doing a show, and it costs me a few bucks a month. And I don't keep it on, so it's really cheap.
Next question.
Coming in from Mumbai, India, Joel asks, has anyone used Rivet from LiveX? If yes, how was the experience?
I was actually going to see, we were talking about, I'm going to be on Tony's show, Conversation with Tony Mobley next week. And I was going to, someone was suggesting that we try SRT. I was thinking we might want to think about using or playing with Rivet to make that work. I can talk to Corey about it, but we can probably get them on too. So to talk about it, if people want to, just put it in the second hour. I think that I'm sure Corey would love to jump on and talk about it. So let's look at that. Next question. Oh, John, I'm sorry, I missed you, John. You put in late.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah,
a little that's really. I'm just flying with no ground below me because there's not a lot of people raising their hands. All right, go ahead, John.
I just wanted to add that I've used a few types of things like that, and I have looked into Rivet and messed with it just personally. And I will say, from a user experience, which is something I really care about, it's actually really great. All the apps are nicely similar, and if I was to send a link or the app off to somebody who didn't really know what to do, I would be confident that they would know kind of what to do, versus some of the alternatives where you get in there, for example, vMix call, some of the interfaces, like what does this button actually do? So that stuff that matters to me seems to be really ironed out. In terms of usability, I'm not entirely sure about how well it will work though.
Yeah, the advantage of Rivet is that LiveX actually does a lot of this, and this is their business. And so when they're developing it with you know, they're really dog fooding it or fish fooding it, whatever you want to call it, over and over and over again. And you know, Corey's a really smart guy, so it's and he's, you know, he's pushing it. So so I think that's I think it could do really well. Next question.
Another one from Joel of Mumbai, India. He says, had a community event with a maximum of 100 viewers. What is the best suggestion? Had narrowed down to Owncast or AWS on AWS. Can anyone suggest any other FOSS solution that can be deployed on the cloud? PS, YouTube and Facebook cannot be used.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Might not be open source, but look at the Media Live and Elemental stack of AWS. It's a really nice stack to get your video conformed. And also, if you need to scale Owncast, you can put it behind a load balancer from AWS or Cloudflare, or you can use Nimble Streamer. There are multiple options there, but yeah,
go ahead, Rupert.
AWS will be the one that saves you a lot of time.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I've been trying to remember the name of the protocol, but isn't there a platform called Jitsi or something like that that could be used for this?
That's a real-time RTC solution, so it's not really a streaming solution. Well, it depends on whether you're, again, whether it's viewers or whether you're interacting. So to your point, Jitsi is probably a good solution if you have to interact like Zoom. You know, Jitsi is kind of the open source version of Zoom. It's got a lot of rough and sharp edges. You know, it's like, welcome to open source. Nothing absolutely is finished. The feature got put in and people didn't clean it off. You know, so that's the typical danger with open source software, is that things don't get shaved, you know, rounded off. They're just sharp edges, and so that's what you feel in Jitsi a lot. But that's if you want to interact with everyone. If you want to view it, you know, there's a lot of other things. I mean, a lot of the players that we see, because you can use AWS, but remember AWS I don't think provides a player. I think that's what you're looking for, Owncast. But a lot of them are, you know, based. The most popular one is probably Video.js, you know, so that, you know, that you can build a player from that, or there's lots of players that are based on it, you know, currently. So go ahead, Jeffrey.
Another thing you can do is you could use something like StreamYard or Restream to send the video to, and then have it go out. And of course, you don't have to, there's many different places you can go to from there, including even cloud options if you wanted to get it into an encoder. And you can, I don't know what the requirements on the YouTube or Facebook, but you can make a very private YouTube that only certain people can go to if the security is the issue for watching.
The problem with the private version is just really cumbersome for, you know, it's really designed as testing streams. It's not designed to do private distribution. We have used it for those kinds of events, but you just end up with a lot of user support related to that. Go ahead, Jonas.
Quick note on the Jitsi, you can't use. I tried using it for more than just a couple. It gets really annoying to like set everything up and use multiple video servers, and you can only send specific people, only the last 5 that talked, and it's a heavier lift. If you want to stream it out over HLS, you can use Nginx RTMP, which takes in RTMP, converts it to HLS with FFmpeg, and then you can serve it however you want. That's probably the most open source.
Player is the tricky part, you know. So that's the, you know, the serving it up is relatively straightforward. The tricky part is a player that will do what you want it to do. Next question.
Coming in from Dominic Dottie, who is an Australian in London. Afternoon, long-time YouTube watcher. I'm a stranded Australian in London trying to get back to Melbourne. Weird question, but thought it would be best place to ask this. I need to send some bags back to Australia from London or Copenhagen. Any suggestions?
Alan?
Yeah, I've used this service here, which is called Shipley, to send things internationally. And you basically say it's sort of for eBay to ship around and getting couriers to pick up, but actually, because any courier company can basically bid on the job, you put in I've got a 40 kilo bag and I want to get it from A to B, and you'll get a huge list of people saying it. And these are absolutely brilliant. I've used them for loads of things in the past, and they're mainly for the UK, but you can easily do international shipping through it, and it's by far the cheapest one I've seen. I don't know if it's outside the UK, but inside the UK, they're fantastic.
Stuart?
Yeah, just a little bit of local news then. Dominic is putting a poster under an extreme load at the moment, and I've actually talked about pausing deliveries. So make sure whatever service you use does not use Australia Post at the moment. Personal experience in getting a camera to come from the US, it took less time to get my Scion here. Let's say San Francisco to Phoenix to Albuquerque to Hawaii to Sydney to Melbourne took less time than getting radio controlled helicopter parts from Sydney. So I would recommend UPS or DHL. Or sorry,
and you're still breaking up, Stuart. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there, but you're losing a lot of packets. The Shipley is something that I'm really interested in. One of the things that, just a little aside, that I was talking to someone about, is one of the things that's really impacting all the shipping, all the chip shortages, all the shipping shortages, and everything else, is the lack of passenger flights, which I didn't calculate into that, but it's the fact that, in a passenger flight, they fill up all the excess space in that passenger flight with cargo that's paid for. And that's all the just-in-time, that was the entire just-in-time model was built on taking out, using, not entire, but a huge portion of it was taking up excess space in an airliner, all these passenger planes going back and forth. It was super efficient. And because people can't go back and forth, there's so many less flights. That's a big point of why this is all pinched. I only mentioned it because I didn't even think of that until a conversation yesterday with someone, and it was just a really fascinating problem. So next question.
Coming in from Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Has anyone worked with WebEx in lieu of Zoom? How does it compare? I have a panelist that insists on using it.
Rupert?
WebEx has been around for a long time, so there's many people who've had a mixture of experiences with it, good and bad. But the thing is, they are adding features all the time, particularly in a competitive marketplace, here recently. So the thing is to try and keep up to date with that and make sure if you are getting opinions, they're up to date. They also have a free trial, so you can dip in to take a look. And just keep in mind, though, it may not just be that panelists' insistence. You quite often see WebEx in large corporations where they're just locked into WebEx and the Cisco system for their own governance reasons.
I don't know if it's up to date, but the last time we used WebEx, the biggest problem, the video quality was fine, but you can't get a clean aperture. So there's lots of little buttons and things on top of them that you can't get rid of. We couldn't get a clean video out of a WebEx connection. The video quality itself and the audio quality itself was fine. There was nothing horrible about it. As a platform, it's pretty old. It doesn't feel modern when you use it. And so, but it is improving. I mean, Zoom is putting so much pressure, but right now the two leaders are Zoom and Teams. And then everybody else, I think, is still trying to figure it out. And the hardest part you have is when you have an embedded, like Rupert talked about, when you have so many people embedded in the use of it, it's hard to change anything quickly when you have lots of people connected to it. So it's going to take them a long time to make that. Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Zoom, actually, the founder actually came from that setup. So a lot of the interface looks similar. And as to your point, Alex, a lot of people, it was the industry standard for a while. So I've had clients even call Zoom WebEx just because that was what they were familiar with.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, AT&T and other communication companies offer dedicated SDI video transport services over long-distance links. With the rise of internet-based transport services like ProtoStream, do you ever see those dedicated services becoming obsolete?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think there's a distinction here between IP-based services and internet-based services. I mean, AT&T and people like that, these transport will give you a handoff. It'll be maybe SDI or all kinds of other protocols, and you may not ever know what the back-end transport is. That is likely to be IP anyway. It won't necessarily be over the internet, but it'll be going across their backbone network, and that way they can control the end-to-end performance. So there's the front end, and then there's what's happening at the back end.
I think that while we don't use them as much as we used to. When you get a dedicated, the Switch is the most popular one that does this, and they basically lease lines from Verizon, Century, AT&T. They'll bring fiber in, and then they convert it, and they'll use anything from, they can do 1 connection or 8 connections or 8 connections and some internet and, a lot of different things. And Linda, I think from the Switch, has been on here in the past, but that's the one we've used a lot. What you get with them though is a what they call 5/9 service, which means that it's going to be up all the time. Like you're not gonna have drops. You're not gonna have, and there's someone at a knock watching your video go through. You're using a dedicated fiber. You're being guaranteed the connections. They're very low latency because they're minimizing the number of things that they're going through to get from one place to the other. So when you need absolute quality and low latency and consistency and reliability, you're still, so large broadcasters and people doing events that matter are still using those kinds of things and will for quite some time. But I do think that, IP continues to be something that we use more and more and more of. But when you're doing a consumer or even a business connection with an internet service provider, unless you're really being, unless you have some kind of true guarantees, it's not the same, as those. Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and here on the panel today. Thoughts about bringing Makana comments into the show? A, as a panelist role of Makana advocate, who can distill the most relevant comments and represent them, or perhaps B, an off-panel role combining similar questions and sending highlights to the host.
It's possible. The thing is that we're pretty busy with what we have already with the panel and going through the questions. We're already still behind. So adding another feed. I really look at the chat. I will admit that I look at the chat as something for the viewers to interact with each other related to the comment, what the content that if they want to interact with us, then they use the question, they use the question and answer system. The chat is there for them to talk amongst themselves, and so I think that it's hard for us to manage many more inputs than we already are. Let's go ahead to the next question. We're going to go move pretty quick, everybody.
Okay, coming in
a couple minutes over, but we're gonna cut through these, and when we get to just a couple more, go ahead.
From Dirk Brewer in Guatemala, I have 80 individual videos of people imitating a song, face swap app, Reface. I want to make a mosaic type video of everyone singing the same song. What app would I use for this? Motion?
Go ahead, Marty.
So hopefully everybody was singing to a guide track so that they're all at the same tempo and key. You can use pretty much any decent video editing system. Resolve is a good one to put these together. It's a long process. You have to line up all of the audio and video and make sure that everybody is in perfect time together so that it looks right. It's something that developed.
Yep, go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you're trying to do the initial stuff in Reface, you might run into problems doing the whole song. You might be able to do clips and things like that. And then also keep in mind that it's still copyrighted material that you're pulling from. So if you're planning to put this online for something, you might want to put that in consideration.
Motion could be a very good one to use because of the replicators. So you could basically have a well of all the folks. If you want individual control over them, then you'll animate them and you can use anything. If you want to have them all, in some of the cases, you may want to have them all pop out and they all move around and they all dance around and move and so on and so forth. A lot of that's a lot easier to do in motion because of the replicator system. And so you can create a lot of behaviors with the video that would be very difficult to do anywhere else. So I would definitely recommend at least playing with it. Could get a little heavy with a lot of videos, but you have to experiment with that. Next question.
Coming from that Australian trapped in London, Dominic Doughty, he says, what do you think of the new Hue lights? And he has a link.
I think the only thing I'll say is I did an experiment with something similar to this years ago, where I changed the ambient light of the room based on the average color of the screen. And I don't know if that's what they're doing. When I see the image, that's what it looks like. And I found that it turned out to nearly cause an epileptic seizure. So it's, so you have to, it'll be interesting to see how it takes it, but I think it's interesting. I mean, I think it's exciting what we can do with our lights these days. Next question.
All right, looks like the last one for the first hour here. Can the ATEM Mini Extreme do a custom multi-view with the 8 HDMI sources? And can you remove the labels from the default multi-view?
Go ahead, John.
Fast answer is no and no. You can do custom multi-views in the ATEM Mini Extreme, but you can only get 7 or more than 8. And then for labels, you could go through and delete all of these labels and it will just show up as a little black background, but with no text, but it's still not quite what you're looking for. So I suspect you can't do what you want to do.
Yeah, I think you can turn the labels off in the Constellation, just not in the, because we can turn them off. I know we can turn them off there, but I haven't tried to turn them off so you can't do that. You can't do that in the Extreme. Interesting. So I don't know why they would limit that. All right. We're now changing direction. We have a lot of questions stacking up related to the business of live streaming. So we're not talking so much about the technical, but really about what it takes to actually do it. And because we have so many questions all stacked up, I think we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So let's start moving a couple of these over here. Go ahead. Let's go to the first question.
Oops, I was unmuted. My goodness. Okay, from JHB in New York. Most people are reluctant to talk about pricing, but approximately what is a 1-hour stream of an event with 3 cameras and audio mix, 2-person crew worth? I have no reference, no idea if it's worth $500 or $5,000. Thanks.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, this can just really depend. Really, even with your amount of people, it's the amount of redundancy your client needs or wants built into the system. And I think that's just a huge variable that makes this difficult to predict.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I also don't think of it as 1 hour. I think of it as either a half day or a full day. Most of the time it's a full day because you have all the prep, all the setup, all the teardown, everything like that. It's a lot more than an hour. Average, even a virtual event takes me an hour to even set up before I start hitting the record button.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and just to add to the whole it depends thing, like within that 1 hour, would there be a whole like orchestra playing, or is it just one person speaking the entire time? That's a drastic shift in pricing there.
And one of the things we don't have any numbers that, oh, this is a $25,000 or a $5,000 or a $500 show. We just figure out the numbers. So we look at what is the going, at least start with, look around. Okay, you got 3 cameras. What's the going rental rate for the 3 cameras? What's the going rental rate for the lenses? What's the going rental rate for the tripods you're going to use? Are you providing lights, and what is the going rate? And you can go find those, and you can kind of find an average of what those rental rates would be. So that gives you a sense of how much the equipment should probably cost inside of your budget. Now you might give a little bit of a discount, but don't give it away for free when you don't have a when it's not a cost center, you can't invest. So, the equipment, if you buy it, takes upkeep, and it took money to buy it, and it took, all those things. And and if a client didn't come to you, they have to rent it from somebody, and so, and it's really good to rent it from you because it means that it's your gear. Anybody who's rented in the past knows that sometimes the gear shows up and it's not quite in the same state that you expected it to be in. And so those are the things to think about. And then think about, okay, you've got 2 people, and what are all their costs, and what are their, what's the day cost? What are you paying yourself? What are they paying them? And you've got to pay everybody, a day rate that makes sense. And then what is the margin that you need to put on top of that? And it can be, for really large projects, it might be 15%. For smaller projects, it might be 30, 35%. And you got to think about what those are, because that's how you run your business. You can't just do the cost of the show, because you have to have something that's actually paying for all the time in between it. So it's not, it's not real margin. You have to be looking at, it's the margin for that show, but it's paying into the overhead of running the business. And so those are some of the things to think about as you kind of go through that, as you make those calculations, in that process. So, but that margin is oftentimes proportional to the size of the job, so you can't, charge the same margin for giant jobs that you do for really little ones. But you also generally take everything, all the little costs that you have there, double or triple them, because that's how long it's going to actually take. Prep is usually the big thing. Remember to calculate. It's not just the days that you're there at the event. It's the meetings with the client. It's the prep. It's the logistics. It's all those other things are part of that puzzle. So those are the things you want to take into account. So yeah, as everyone keeps on saying, it depends, but that also depends on all those factors that you start to calculate. Next question.
Another one coming in from JHB in New York. In a digital event, what different types of insurance or less insurance should the production company carry versus an on-site event?
I go ahead, Rupert.
So if you're not going on site, you need less of on-site liability insurance. You don't necessarily need to insure yourself against somebody falling over a truss that you left on the floor, something like that. But in the remote digital world, it depends what you kind of mean by company. If you're operating from home, I think you have a whole set of other considerations, and that's really what you want to look at. I mean, at home, if you're running big projects, you need to make sure that you're covered for that for your business activities at home.
The one you want to look at is errors and omissions. So or called E&O insurance. So that means if something goes wrong, you're covered against that. Something that is not just a active whatever, but you need to be covered for that, or someone can come after you for it. So depending on the size of the job, you will eventually need E&O insurance, regardless of any kind of loss or liability. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I imagine the E&O insurance would come into play if you're charging an entry fee, if you're charging a fee to attend this all digital event, and something goes wrong in the middle of it. I don't know where the liability would land.
Yeah. So those are the things that you want to be careful of. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. What might the consideration be between pivoting your existing business to live production compared to setting up a new business?
Go ahead, Josh.
I would say branding and mind share. So, a new question game show might go over well with more flexible ideas than one that's consistently known for being led by Alex Trebek. Or the mind share, people from old media will always be looking at the way of doing things through the lens of old media.
Yeah, I think that the other thing to think about is just what can you do and how much you're going to invest. So like at any business, you might have to set up a stand. If you did a franchise, you might spend $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 to get that franchise set up, or any business. And so having knowing where that money's going to come from, and being able to have that investment and being able to have a run rate for a little while you might have another job, you might have a spouse, you might have some money saved up, but you got to know that you have a run rate of 6 months to a year of time that you can do it before it's going to start going into the black at least. It depends on how close you are to the industry. Are you making a small pivot or are you making a large pivot? A large pivot is you have to now sell people on it, because what you want to do is think about how to get out in front of people. And one of the ways you're going to get out in front of it is you're going to do a lot of, stuff for less money than it costs to do it. I mean, that's how you prime the pump. Like you pump and nothing comes out. And so you can do some marketing. The mistake people make is waiting for that job to come in that's going to start moving it all forward and pushing for large margins when they don't have any work. Your gear sitting at home and your gear sitting in the garage does not make any money. You're not getting experience. You're not making connections. You're not doing all those other things. And so when we got into live streaming, we were doing it. We basically did it for free for a year. I mean, we had another business, which was the membership. So I didn't need to make money with it, but we were doing it because we were trying to figure it out and we were failing constantly, and screwing things up and everything else. But, when it failed, the person we were working with, the nonprofit or our own members or other people were like, they did the best they could. As soon as people start paying you for it, they're going to stop saying that. So anyway, so you need to kind of figure out, if you're pivoting, just really know that this is live streaming and live events is an unforgiving business. Like just as a business discussion, this is not something where you can go back and fix it later. If you have a bad start, if you have audio fall out in the middle of the show, if you have all kinds of things you don't expect, people are going to be upset. And there's no way to fix it. And there's just nothing worse than being in a live event that's coming unwound, because you're like, it's unwinding and there's nothing you can do about it. And so, all of your work is in the prep, and preparation and the logistics and the redundancy and the backups and the communication and all the process and everything else. And it can be very, very, it is a challenging business to get into. So you just want to take it very seriously. Next question.
All right, coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, we hear, do we need a union or guild of freelance live stream hosts? And how do we advertise that sort of service to corporate clients?
I don't know what you're talking about. Of hosts or of?
As in people doing exactly what I'm doing right now, as in doing the switching for a corporate event or that sort of stuff, doing it freelance for anybody who needs somebody to come in with the specialist skills and control a meeting and do like what Grant's doing, but on smaller scale.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if I think a union would be difficult in a global environment. I think that over time, we would probably want to create a way that we can guarantee that somebody has the skill set that's needed. I think that there are three things that you pay attention to: the raw skill set that you have to find a way to test, how many hours they've done it inside of a system that you can track, and a 360 review of everyone that's worked with you, where they, and with objective and subjective ideas, and having a rating of that type would be very useful. So not something I haven't thought about. So, but we're probably not quite there yet. Next question.
All right, from Sky Gleason in Seattle, panelist today and next scarf supermodel. LA and New York City were two locations for the entertainment businesses. Corporate production happens everywhere. Now that everyone in the world is a video producer, what is the value of a professional in the AV industry?
Well, it's your connections and your ability to execute. Like that. That's anybody can get a job anywhere at this point. There's lots of people who are doing it, but there's also a lot of work. I mean, there's so much work to be done out there, and anyone who's not getting that work is just not getting out there. And so, or at the price that you want or whatever. But there's so many people trying to figure this out right now, and it's just a function of marketing and being able to manage that and being able to bring enough of it in to make that work. But you're right that everybody, corporate will eventually, they eventually hire external. They start internal sometimes, or they start internal, then they go external, then they go back to internal, then they go back to external. There's kind of like this back and forth of, we can do it ourselves. Oh, there's a lot of overhead. We can do it ourselves. Oh, there's a lot of overhead. So that tends to be the bounce that corporate goes through to do that. And it's pretty common and somewhat entertaining. They'll always land on, we'll have a small team. Where corporations, when they mature, they always land on, we'll have a small internal team and we'll outsource everything else. That's the sustainable model for corporations, but it oftentimes takes them a little time to get there. Anyway, but I think that right now we're at the beginning of a huge revolution, of how this is going, where we're not there yet because we still have event teams that are desperately clinging on to the past, of the way that they used to do things. And so we're still in this thing where, like, how do we do it in a hybrid? And how do we do it here? And we're never going back to virtual. And part of that is because there's not a lot of good tools to do it well virtually. And people aren't taking their camera connection seriously. And, we forget inside of office hours what it's like to have Zoom at 360. Like we live in a 1080p world in office hours, which is an entirely different existence than most of the world out there. So when they say they don't want to look like a Zoom, it's because it's really washed out and all mushed together. And I don't think we'd still be doing this if we were at 360. And so I think that that's another challenge, is getting that higher quality video through the system. But I think that when it sinks in that we're not going back, when the employees are not coming back to the office, when people are moving to, into the inner parts of the country, when, all those things are happening, the need to do virtual events, the need to do events that have no centerless events, digital first events, is going to just keep getting bigger. And so it's just a matter of building the network of people that you can work with, and then really executing. The thing is if you get a job, if you're volunteering for a job, you have to treat it like it's everything, and you have to execute. And there's two things. One is working hard. The other one is working smart. It's not taking on more than you can do, effectively, because when you are bobbing about, not, with things not really working, it doesn't set you up for people who watch it don't go, I think that's the person I want to hire to do it. You're better off saying, no, we can't do that, and pull back, way back on or set up new requirements for, your partners, you're better off doing that than to say yes to everything and then not be able to execute it. So those are some of the things to kind of think about as you grow, but it's a huge opportunity coming. I mean, this is online events. It's got a big growth curve, so it's, yeah. Next question.
Thank you. Coming in from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. Following the theme of starting a live video production company from scratch, what would be the priority buys, so to speak, besides cameras? What are the foundational must-haves?
Go ahead, George.
So in September 2021, I would speak for me. I think right now I would move away from the big ticket items and do things like your encoders, like decimators, proper cables. So I would build out those small ticket items that, I would keep in my Pelican kits and then rent the big ticket items if I need to do a heavy lift outside. That's what I would recommend for if you're just starting out.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Networking, very important, end to end, and then establish your presence in AWS early, get an account going, start warming up that pipeline in case you need to ramp up quickly.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would first off invest in manpower, good manpower that can get good training and learn quick as well. And also, of course, being an audio guy, I would say audio is a good investment because audio equipment typically lasts a long time. Like say the Yamaha QL series that was announced in 2014. It's still pretty much a standard nowadays. On the higher end of cameras as well, the Alexa line was announced, and RE Alexa line was announced in 2010. If you go for the higher end of equipment, they typically last longer and can give you a longer run on income.
Marty?
Yeah, I would say very important is figuring out how you're going to do audio on location and at your production point, and how you're going to do networking, especially on location, because you can't always rely on the facility's network. So figure out how you're going to handle that.
You want things to be solid, even if they're basic. I will always say lean towards the hardware switchers and so on and so forth, and specifically the Blackmagic switchers, just because they just tend to fail a lot less. Most clients will not work with you past 1 or 2 failures. So you just can't. You really have to keep your elbows in and keep things that are relatively stable. I will say that if you were going to start a live production company at this point, I'd be tempted to try to figure out how to do it in the cloud, where you can serve that up. There's a lot of people having a business that's just doing Zoom events with graphics, with playout and graphics and everything else, without anything. Like literally, they're running. I ran when we first started the COVID thing, while we were building up the pipeline inside of, because when 090, before I showed up and brought in a couple jobs that needed a lot of hardware, didn't have a lot of hardware. It was just it rented what it needed and hired the people that they needed to make that work. We had some jobs that required very specialized hardware, so it allowed us to ramp up on that hardware. But in the first couple months, when COVID hit and I had just started at the company, I was running everything off my iMac with maybe an ATEM switcher and so I had some, I was able to play out things into it. I was using Mimo Live. I was doing lots of really, really basic things, and we were charging for it. And if I wasn't part of a larger company, I probably could have made a reasonable amount of money just sitting there as a lone gunman, just sitting there just doing, as a freelancer, just doing people's events, because the number didn't move the needle for a company, but for a person it would have been a reasonable income, just doing those things out of Zoom. So know that providing a really good Zoom service is something that you can do. You just have to really understand the flow of it. But then I would also be researching how to do that in the cloud before I started doing, especially if you're not really busy. I would be paying attention to what's going on with the Belfast project, what's going on with the Tony Mobley, the conversations with Tony Mobley, what's happening with Victor, what other people here are doing, because you want to know how to do that, because that could give you incredible scale. They're producing incredible content for very little out of pocket. And so I would definitely be doing research and getting on those teams to be part of that, and do as little hardware purchases as you only buy stuff. I only buy stuff when I need it. Like, we don't have this thing for this project, I will now buy it. I don't buy a lot of stuff that is speculative. I don't buy things that, oh, I think I'm going to need that somewhere in the future. There's a handful of things we do that with because it's like, oh, it's a lot of wiring to put in. Like we put in all these patch panels in the back. That's not something that we needed for that project, but it's an investment that needed to be made, so that we don't have to keep on thinking about that. Next question.
Okay, coming in from.
Did I get to you, Marty? I think I jumped in. Yeah, I get it. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. Excuse the phone. If you were starting a live video production company.
That is quite a
Sorry. That's
Go ahead.
the perils of live production. From Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. If you were starting a live video production company from scratch,
yeah, go keep going.
What cameras would you choose? Are the new Blackmagic cameras a place to start?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so to get really specific, I'm using the new Blackmagic Plus, and I have the new Pro one here as well. So if you want to talk about those in after hours, we can definitely do that. But just to take a step back from that, these are specifically made really for studio production. So without knowing what you actually want to do with them, I wouldn't recommend running to a event over here, a meetup over here, a conference over there with cameras like this. Was mentioned earlier by George, renting these bigger cameras for now until you know exactly what you're going to do. I've always sort of regretted many of the camera purchases that I've made over the years, but never really like the sturdy tripod or the good cables. So, but if you want specifics on these cameras, sure, we can chat about that later.
Good, Stuart.
This can be a very confusing topic, and there is a lot of things, but one simple rule: between $2,000 and $10,000 for video production cameras, there's no such thing as a bad camera. There's just choices that suit you better. But don't look at which brand you're going to get. Look at which integrates to your workflow better. If you've already got an ATEM Mini, the Blackmagic cameras will be controllable, so that'd be useful. If you've got access to other hardware to control the cameras, they might be a better choice. But look at the lenses, because the lenses will last a lot longer. You will keep them through multiple generations of cameras, and you want to be able to adapt them to whatever comes next. So a lens with a longer flange focal distance, such as the Nikons, the Pentax, and the Canon EF, can be adapted to Blackmagic cameras, to Sony cameras, to Canon cameras, to Nikon mirrorless cameras. It gives you a lot more options with the longer flange focal distance lenses, and you will keep those, and they will be a much bigger investment to buy, but also over the times of your business's operation.
Go ahead, George.
So going back to what I mentioned earlier, obviously a lot of us are using the 6K serial. You're able to see those right now on these panels. But again, I'll go back to rentals. If you're just starting into the business, I would rent a couple of cameras and set them up. They're especially the Blackmagic cameras are really cheap to rent from somewhere like Lens Rentals. So I would rent and just set up a bunch of the cameras and just play with them, see what works for you.
Marty?
So I would ask what kind of business you're going to be going after, what kind of clients and webcasts you're going to try and go after. If you're going to be doing business conferences, if you're going to be doing music concerts, unless you want to, in addition to the cameras, invest in pan tilt heads, you might want to just consider a PTZ camera. There are some really good PTZ cameras out there with good lenses and good sensors. And that might be the easiest way to go and the most flexible.
Part of it is also what the client thinks when you show up. So you just have to remember that, like, they'll make decisions about you based on what the hardware is that you show up with. I would say now with the price drop, the best value for a camera, I'm not saying the cheapest camera, but the best value is the Blackmagic 12K. At $6,000, it's an enormous amount of power. It will last you for many, many things for a long time. And I, did a lot of jobs on the Ursa, the Gen 1, Ursa, mini Ursas or whatever the mini Ursa Mini. The Gen 1s, I think I probably had 16 of them, and we had the other cameras, the other studio cameras, we had the other pieces of cameras and so on and so forth. And we slowly stopped using them because the Ursas looked so much better and they have so much more control and so much more, IO. And you can eventually, what you want to think about is you're going to invest in something Clients will make a decision. You show up with a PTZ camera, you are a certain class of production person for them. You show up with an Ursa with a big lens, and you're a different class of production for them. And so, and that means that they will think about bigger projects with you. They'll think about all this if you do it well. It still has to look good, it still has to work well, but they will make it, the size of the camera will affect how they view how much money they can spend with you, and so you have to kind of think through those processes for your clients. And so we came with, Gen 1 Ursas with Fujinon lenses, and it's a different class of, work that we got because we had that and because it had a certain look to it, and it was easy for us to set up. We also are able to change from PL to EF to, a lot of different things inside of those cameras. And there are a lot of things that I think are coming in the future that camera is capable of that we're not using. You can also add fiber backs onto it. You can add, it's a kind of a rector set of monitors and other things and outboards and so on and so forth. And so it's an incredible value right now. I probably would not buy a camera before middle of October. We're right before NAB, so I wouldn't do it, but I do, just to make sure that Blackmagic isn't doing something else. I will say, as someone who built my business around, for a long time around Blackmagic hardware, they've come a long way and they're going to win. You can buy a lot of other things, but the problem is that when they're moving this fast and they have so much of the bottom of the pyramid, that we're now in an inevitable, and you can try to make calculations, but in the live event space, they are going to win. And there is just too much. There's too much pressure now, and so you can decide what you want to do, but if you buy outside of that, you're buying into an eventual dead end. Go ahead, John. John Barker, did you have your hand up? Oh, is it different?
Apologies, I don't know how that happened.
Okay, got it. Very good. So anyway, I would buy and I would look at that, and again, the Versas you'll buy and you'll use them for the next decade. Like that, those cameras are not, have enough overhead that you'll use them for a decade. So that you want to think through that as well. The smaller ones you'll buy and you'll upgrade and you'll use them for smaller gigs, and then you won't use them at all. That's what we did with the studio cameras, which is what we bought first. The little micros are good for high and wides, overheads, that kind of thing, but you want to wait because they got to give us a log version of that or some kind of version that isn't just 709. That's the big problem with them right now. Next question.
From Danny Law in Malaysia. Sounds like an old television series. Would it be norm to indemnify against site network issues during a live stream event?
Rupert?
I mean, this can be done, but what would be the norm, I would say, is to explore every other option first. I mean, you want to look at everything. You want to work collaboratively with everyone. You want to just avoid that where you can. And, if you want to identify that as a risk to the customer, do it, collaboratively, not as a confrontation, and then wrap every possible precaution and protection around it you can. You want to show that you're providing comms, for example, in the background in case something goes wrong, and then quietly you can have some solutions maybe in your back pocket, but try and wrap it with some options.
Often try to stay away from being the one accountable for the network unless you are getting really paid for that. Don't do it as a favor. Don't ever do a network. If you're doing a live stream, don't ever do the network as a favor. It is something that they're paying you for, and you're explicitly putting people on it, or you want them to do it. Because if you just add it as a package and your EIC who's working on something else is also doing network, trouble. That's all I'm going to say. There's trouble because network takes a full-time attention once you start getting paid for it. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Why might freelancers prefer to form a business entity to operate from, like a limited or incorporated company, rather than staying self-employed or using a DBA or a TA?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, one would want to do this primarily first to separate the company's liabilities from your own personal assets and your own personal funds. And also starting up a corporation would allow you to scale and grow much easier than if you are just acting as a sole proprietor.
In California, it's the law. If you don't do that, we have to put you on payroll based on AB5, which is it's a really complicated way to do business here. So you have to, and it's been much easier. it's cleaner for people hiring you to hire a company, on many, many levels. So we had been threatening to stop hiring freelancers and require TINs, tax ID numbers, for businesses. We had threatened to do that, and AB5 kind of pushed us towards that a lot faster because it was just it becomes a logistical nightmare in California to bring somebody on that doesn't have their own company. So I'd highly recommend it. Next question.
Coming in from Ari Block and Tel Aviv, Israel. How do you segment the live streaming market you operate in? Do you specialize in a vertical market or a specific type of production?
Rupert?
So every vertical market can have its own characteristics and its own idiosyncrasies, and that might include the language and vernacular in that market, their calendaring cycle, all kinds of things, the etiquette in there. And it's kind of up to you of how much time you want to spend getting to know that market, and then how comfortable those customers feel with you that you understand them. Having said that, across all the vertical markets, you really want to categorize your customers by really the customers who want what it is you have to offer. They recognize the value and they have the money to pay for it, and ultimately the customers you enjoy working with. And you can find those across any vertical market almost.
Go ahead, Alan. What's that? Yeah, can't hear you, Alan.
Sorry, I've selected the wrong question. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. We mostly segment it by people who come in and ask for something that's related to video. So, we do live, I do post, we build, I've done projection in Cambodia. So, that's how we segment it. Someone came in and asked us to figure it out. And I find that that's a pretty useful way to approach it, because we end up with a very, very wide range of understanding. So it's, I view media as we make things that you watch, and how that looks, whether it's coming to you live or VOD or on a theater screen or on a camera. It's just turning the reality into bits and showing them to people. And everything that fits into that is usually something that I look at. Next question.
Coming in from Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines. Do you charge separately for tech runs scheduled a day before along with the ingress, or do you just make it part of the total cost or an extra item versus same-day tech runs?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'll always have it as a single line item together with the rest of the project, because having it as another line item can open it up to scrutiny by the client. Like, if you need an extra day, then don't leave it open for someone to take that out. But be honest though, if you don't need an extra day the day prior, and you can do the setup on the day itself, then be honest and don't charge for it.
I will say I resist same day setups as much as I possibly can. Like they're probably less than 5% of my work is same day setups, because there's no chance to error correct. You don't have something isn't working just right. I've had stuff where I've literally put someone on a plane in New York and had them come to Davos to hand me something because something wasn't working that, in the day before setup, so solving that, you can solve things that you can't solve on the same day. And so I try to, to Mickey's point, I try to package it in as a requirement. And we usually, for ours, it depends, it depends. I try to make most of my budgets very much like, this is all the stuff we're going to give you and this is how much it's going to cost, and try to not have them think about the items. But there's some clients that we work with that want to see all the items. So it just depends on who you're working with, but it doesn't really help the clients to see all the items. They think it does, but it doesn't. They just have to decide whether it's worth it. Next question.
Coming in from Jonas What in Stuttgart, Germany. What tools are you using to run your business? Big question.
Go ahead, Alan.
This is a very big question, and if it's just the running of the business side of it, I use a good CRM package and a good invoicing package, preferably ones that interact with each other. So for me, I use FreeFlow, FlowU, and I use a different invoicing engine on that though, which is it's certainly UK specific, but I think also in Europe, which is Free Agent. Both of them link all my bank and everything together. But it's a huge question, that one.
Good, right?
QuickBooks for the accounting, but it does so much of the other things. I don't run it myself, but that has become a real standard in bookkeeping. But in invoicing, it can do a lot of different things. And of course, they're always advancing, trying to do other things that maybe they shouldn't.
The two most important apps that I use are Numbers and Keynote. Because I build the budgets in Numbers and display them that way, and I use Keynote to tell people what I'm going to do. So those are probably the two most useful ones. QuickBooks we use for our back end, and we use a program called Gusto to keep track of hours and to approve them and process payments. So I mean within the employee structure. So which I didn't like. I will admit I hated it at first, and now I kind of it's pretty good. So it works well. I haven't seen anything that works better. So next question.
Coming in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. How do you stay top of mind when people are thinking about hiring someone to run a live stream?
Go ahead, Mickey.
This is coming from an audio supplier that is hired by producers, not like a producer looking for corporate clients. Social media is a huge thing, and keeping tabs on what everyone is doing and just keep on interacting with them and like looking at their other work and commenting on it is a huge deal. It's a lot of this whole industry is about a lot about who you know as opposed to what you know.
Josh.
Yeah, as far as personnel, it depends on whether someone's going to be client facing or tech facing. So someone client facing would have those type of soft skills versus those that are more geared towards the technology.
Go, Rupert.
If I understood what Mickey said, I mean, it's as much about keeping your clients top of mind as it is them keeping you in mind. So that's my take on it. Make sure you're always looking out, see what they're up to, see if there's any opportunities, or if they call you, you can be already kind of one step ahead of the projects they may have going on. But also just be likable. I mean, that's why people will come back.
I find my mode of operandi that I've used for the last 35 years is that I serve the market that I'm interested in. Like I'm trying to find ways to figure stuff out. I'm trying to help other people do that. I'm trying to be in that market without trying to any kind of overt sales at all. I just know that karma will sort itself out. And you just sit there and push value into your market, and other things come out the other end generally. And for how people stand out for me, how I stay top of mind is usually that they are posting something cool. The tricky part in LinkedIn, for instance, is we've talked about this a little bit in the past, of the whole, like, I was really glad to work on this project. You kind of know that's a humble brag. And so, it kind of it comes across as a humble brag when you do it. A humble brag is, of course, you saying something that's supposed to be humble, but you're really just showing off, and everyone knows it. so you have to be kind of careful of those posts. And so, a lot of times I'll post something that's cool. What I try to do is really think about whether it's interactions with the clients, it's interactions on social media, is that I want 5 or 10 posts that are just interesting and useful to every post that is something that I'm asking for something or trying to push something down the path. You don't want people to see you as they're getting a sales, or you're trying to get something from them every time they interact. Like if someone links me on LinkedIn and then immediately the next email is trying to sell me on something, I just unhitch that, like I'm not interested. So you want people to be excited to talk to you about things that are just ideas, and they don't have to have I think the thing is a lot of people get into this kind of scarcity mode where they're trying to turn everything into a sale all the time. I'm just trying to interact and solve problems with folks. And sometimes they need to hire me to do it. And sometimes I'm just having brainstorming sessions with them. And usually I get the best clients that way, because I'm just like, whatever, we'll keep talking because they're getting me to think about something that I might use somewhere else as well. It's a real world problem. And so you want to try to, the more relaxed you can be and just let it do what it needs to do, the better. But the other thing is helping other people. Like, there's a lot of people here, people on the panel are top of mind for a lot of people watching this. People in Discord that are helping people are on the top of mind for a lot of people. People jumping into these test things, whether it's the Belfast method or the Tony Mobley's or whatever, they're top of mind. Like, I have it like, oh, those people know this, 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 and this. And the people, like, I hire probably 80% of the people that we need for a specific thing or hired from this group, and how they show up for me is whether they're on the panel, whether they're helping in Discord, whether they're doing cool projects, whether they're, all those things. And it's not because I'm trying to pay them off for doing that. It's just that I just know that I know what they know because they're part of that process, And so, so getting in and helping other people is a big piece of, and that can be this panel, it can be Discord, it can be jumping on volunteering for projects. It's going to be all those things, get you involved with everyone else. Next question.
Another one coming in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. How important is a website when starting out in the business versus word of mouth? Do you create clips of past events, testimonials, a gear list? What gives?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, this can be a piece of the puzzle, and that all kind of depends a little bit. But if you're in a position where you have to choose where to spend your time and money, you want to make sure that you reserve some of that for making contacts, actually getting out there and meeting people, building a network. Website is you need to maybe check that box. But when it comes to deciding what to put on it, try not to put everything out there. You want to have a separate layer of stuff you have to offer a contacts when you meet them. It's like, hey, this isn't necessarily out there, but it's some information I'd like to present you with now as a contact that I've made.
You go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you want to be, that would be one of the first things I do is establish the name of your company and register it as a URL. And so that once you have a website, you can use that then with the name of your company as part of your email address. So it is all structured. And if you don't have a web presence, a lot of time these days, people look to see if you have a web presence. If you don't have a web presence and don't show up in a search, you're not real. So I think it's fairly important as far as establishing a company, even if you only just put contact information, and if you don't even have a list of things you do, just a description of what your company does and what services you provide and that kind of information. It's a landing place for people that are looking for you,
You go, John.
Yeah, Courtney put it really well there. It is a landing place, and putting all this stuff on your website is great, but it's really just for yourself to put content on there. What I found helpful is to put helpful articles or guides on there that are actually useful to people, not just SEO crammed words. But in general, word of mouth I've found over the years is way more important than a website. It can just be a form to get people in contact with you.
Yeah, I think that I definitely agree with all of those, that it really is a place for people to find you. You don't spend too much time on it. Go ahead, Sky.
Totally agree with everything you're saying. It's the new electronic brochure. It's the place that you put what you do, how you do it, and how to contact you for more intimate customization. And don't think that you don't have to be the webmaster anymore. There's a lot of templates out there. Just do something simple. And also understand are you going to try to make money off of the website? That's a whole different build. That's a whole different business.
And I will say, just putting your shingle out, something like Squarespace works really well. It doesn't cost you very much. There's a bunch of templates. You throw them up, they just work. And you wanted to keep it clean and responsive, and they do most of the work for you. They make sure that it works on an iPad and an iPhone and whatever else you're doing. And you can just do something and just keep it basic. Don't do anything zany unless you're a web person, unless you got Ken. Don't do anything zany. And even then, keep it conservative. But I think the hard part is when people try to work too hard at their website. A, it takes up an enormous amount of resources, and B, I did this. My early sites were really labor intensive, really hard to fix, and didn't move the needle any more than they would have been if they were basic. Next question.
This comes in from Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois. How do you price these live stream services? Are there standards for pricing similar to camera operators, etc.? Office Hours Lab to develop solid pricing models, perhaps?
Go ahead, George.
So I'm going to try to take my time quickly and answer this question. So I think what's important for me is crew. So you want to make sure if you're going to use a freelance crew, that you contact all those folks that you think you might want to use on a project, get their day rates, and make sure that you put that as a priority on your line item, that they get their day rates. A lot of times you might have, if you don't get the right day rate from a crew member, they might want to jump ship on you. So make sure you lock in your day rate folks first. Also, as we move to the cloud and so forth, as part of that crew going to need any kind of gear, laptops or any case. So you need to start building, look at those positions and see if you need to send them any gear for them to operate. Whether everyone has a Stream Deck, some folks might not. So as you fill those positions, make sure that you're considering all those points to make the project move along.
Good, Marty.
So over the years, I've developed a spreadsheet template that has all of the costs for all of the rental gear, all of the day rates for every piece of equipment that I have, all of the different kinds of labor rates for contractors and freelancers and such. And, and I've built that template with formulas to calculate things like markup and overage and overhead to cover, basic rent and insurance and stuff like that. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's not like it's what does it cost to do it? Like what is the cost of making it work? You have to kind of think about it, and then you have to think about whether that job's worth it to do that job. Everything has to be worth doing, and maybe you're getting something out of it in a couple different ways, but you have to kind of think through that process. Try to make it as low impact on your client as possible. Make it complicated for our client. Or there's a lot of things like calculating, like try to figure out a way that you can package it in a way that just is this, and you can be laid back when you say, okay, it's going to be this, but if I show up at 6, it's going to be more. And if I do this, it's going to be less, and everything else just gets confusing, for the client. And you just want to make it kind of, there's some people we work with, it's like this much a day. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's just like, and it's what's funny is more expensive per day, but I don't have to think about it. It's a line item that I understand and I know, and they get put in more often because I don't have to think about there's no hidden costs that are going to show up in my production. And so that you want to think about that too, because people make decisions not only on cost. So there's a temptation to charge as little as possible and then needle people for all the little extras, that might be there, and that drives their clients crazy. And they just don't want to, regardless of whether you're less expensive or not, they won't hire you they won't not hire you, but they'll avoid hiring you because it's more complicated. And then they have to do a whole bunch of stuff on the back end. And so you just have to kind of think through that as well. Next question.
This one from Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines. For someone starting in the business targeting small to medium-sized corporate customers, which equipment do you suggest to be purchased and which ones would be rented?
Go ahead, John.
These days, I think some decent computers is probably a good place to start, whether you're going to do virtual productions or on-site productions. Whenever I built a live streaming computer a year ago, I spent ages trying to decide what one to go for, what to build. And of course, now I wish I went for the next one up or the faster, the better processor. So I think some computers would be a good thing to buy. And then, like we talked about earlier, the big items like cameras and stuff would be the ones to rent.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, so it's know the equipment in your workflow. So that's the first most important bit. So make sure you know the stuff you're going to buy and the stuff you're going to hire, like the back, like the back of your hand. So you understand that completely. Then the buy things is stuff you cannot readily rent when you're starting out. If you can't get hold of a bit of equipment from a rental house, then you're going to need to buy it. And then it's the hire the bits that you're going to be using that are too high a capital expenditure initially. So you're not going to go out and buy a 12K if you don't have that initial capital, but you can go and hire one for the first few jobs and then eventually go and buy one. So it's working out. If you're going to be doing 100 jobs a year, well, you can start quite easily building up these things. But if you're only going to be doing a half dozen or so, then it's working out the items you can't get hold of easily, and they're the ones you buy, and everything else you can hire.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just to John's point, in terms of computing power, I mean, don't overlook the cloud there. You can effectively rent computing power if it fits into your pipeline, but that's one way to get access to it without having to invest large amounts of money in the actual iron hardware.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And don't forget that if you're going to target small to medium corporate customers that are just going to be one-day jobs here and there, rental, you have to calculate in your time to go pick up the rental equipment, check it out, test it out, learn it, send it back. That can take up an extra day that the client usually doesn't get billed for.
If I was going to start a business focusing on these smaller clients. What I would probably, just to give you a really quick list of how I would think through this, if I didn't have a lot of money and I wanted to have a basic ability to do this, I would get 3 6K cameras with 24 to 70 lenses with cages on them with Benro tripods. I would have an X32 switch mixer with 2 laptops and a handful of NAND lights. And that would be like what I have as my base. I can go and do a show. It's going to look great. If I need to rent a longer lens, I can rent a longer lens. The mics, I probably have a handful of wired mics and then I would augment them with, might get some Sennheisers, to have as wireless for short things. This is it's different than what I said before because I know what Greg does. He just works with larger clients. But if you're looking at small and medium-sized businesses, especially overseas, they're not going to be as sensitive to bigger cameras and all this other stuff. And you want to keep it inexpensive, but having a base system that you can go out, that you own, that you will charge for. The other thing to remember is that hardware generates revenue. It's a passive revenue income if you're doing enough of it. And having that not be a cost on top of everything, you make a miscalculation on how long it took. Well, some of that's buffered by the fact that you charged $800 for all the hardware or $1,500 for all the hardware. That's an extra little thing after it's been paid off that just comes in from the job. So keep in mind that, having a real basic system that you can go out and do and that will look like what I do. Oh, and an ATEM, obviously an ATEM Extreme, no, ISO would be the other thing that I would have there. And that little system, I could do a lot of shows with. I could probably make a living that was reasonable with that little system in the back of my car in Marin, here in California, just letting people know that I could do that. So, so that's a solid little way to do it. Go ahead, Marty, and then Mickey. Pretty quick, we're running out of time.
Okay. Rentals are good for short-term, usage. A job here, a job there, because you're going to pay a lot more for it over time if you use it a lot than if you were purchasing it. But there are other options between purchasing, which is ownership, and renting, which is usage, especially if you're thinking that you're going to be upgrading over time. There's a new method of acquiring equipment called as a service, technology as a service, which is more and more popular now in the integration market, but can be applicable to production companies as well. And it allows you to upgrade equipment anytime you want to. And you're not paying to own it. You will never own the equipment. You're paying to use it for anything that you want to use.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just because, Ted, you're in the Philippines and I know how hard sometimes it could be to get good quality cables. I recommend get 300-meter reels of Cat6, coax, and balanced audio cable. You'll thank me someday.
I'm going to request that no one no one raises their hand for any more of these. Whatever we have, don't add any more to the end of these. I need the panelists to get further ahead, and B, we got to close the hour up. So we're just going to cut through what we have here. So if you raise your hand now, I'm just going to ignore it. So next question.
All right, coming from Sam Downey in Bristol, England. But who has Alex Lindsay's budget for live streaming to buy Blackmagic cameras, etc.? What about mid-level budgets, including for simple setups?
Yeah, let's keep it pretty quick. Alan and then Stuart.
Again, going back to the previous question, hire the gear in. There are cheaper Blackmagic cameras than a 12K. We can get pocket ones if it's a small thing.
Yeah, we just talked about.
Which you've just talked about.
Yeah.
So there are cheaper options, but you build it into your budget. So that's all.
Stuart?
Just starting out, don't be afraid of buying a second-hand camera. You don't have to buy a new one. The camera I'm on right now is a Sony VG900E from 2012. So it's not the brand new latest and greatest. The other thing is, if it's a fixed point camera, yes, you can get away with IP-based security cameras. So I know I have for drag racing, but it's choosing the camera that matches the task again, and choosing the lens that matches the task. Zcams will do you a Zcam E1 or E2 will give you a high-speed camera, but be careful, they do overheat. Sony mirrorless, Panasonic mirrorless, and what have you are all good, reliable brands. As I said before, between about $2,000 and $10,000 US, there are no bad cameras.
And I'm just going to keep coming back to the fact that with an ATEM with 6Ks, you're going to punch way above your weight as far as the look of your show, and you got to figure out a way to punch over your weight when you're getting started. So just remember, and because you can shade the cameras, they're going to have short depth of field, they're going to be able to be controllable. All of those things make it easier as a one-man show or two-man show or two-person show to do. And so I would highly recommend a unified system to do that as opposed to spreading it out. Next question.
From Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. What kind of things can you provide as an added value service to set you apart from the others doing the same job?
Real quick, Josh and then Rupert.
Yeah, I think the value added to set yourself apart is to show that you really care about the person and their vision. You may have the same skill set and offer the same services, but if you ask them questions, what are you trying to get out of this, and get them to see that this isn't just a canned, stamped service that you offer, but that you really care about their service, they may not accept your suggestions, but just making them shows that you're interested in their vision.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Say access to office hours. I've certainly been able to have conversations where, I've had the knowledge and the ability to say, hey, look, I could call into a Zoom right now and get 12 different opinions on this matter instantly. And it's an interesting conversation.
Really understand how you're going to get in and how you're going to get out, and really think through all the logistics carefully so that it's a smooth operation, as opposed to, it's not just a matter of getting the operation done, it's getting the operation done in a way that the client enjoys it. So next question.
Coming from Douglas Carmichael, would you recommend a pro or business Zoom account for an independent producer?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, pro is a good place to start, particularly if you are wanting to host a meeting with a potential client. You want to obviously stay off a free account for that, but really at business, that will give you access to some features that will be really useful. It will enable you, if you're working with customers or projects that have business, it will enable you to get familiar with those features. If you're working with customers or projects that don't have business, it'll allow you to speak knowledgeably about those features and help them get on a better account. And if they have nothing, you'll be able to maybe dedicate a seat to that project. Obviously, you want to stay and be careful of not reselling anything, but you can bring that to the table.
There's a lot of people here with a lot of accounts that you can partner with too. It's not selling it, it's just partnering with them to work on the project with you that have really good accounts. Next question.
Coming in from Jonas Duttel in Stuttgart, Germany. How would you budget out cloud production? Just one big package, or do you do line items?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Not different from non-cloud productions. You know what you need. So unless asked, one line item for everything.
Next question.
Sorry, my mouse was in another country. All right, Jonas Duttel in Stuttgart, Germany. How do you handle backups for people, especially on an SMB?
It's hard. A lot of times what we do is we charge a little bit more and we package it in so that we have the backups. We don't want to have the online discussion. We try to find a way that it's still cost effective for the client, but you want to have the backups built into it, rather, them taking them out. Everyone thinks that that's going to be fine until it doesn't work, and then it's all your fault. Just remember that they're not going to, whatever they say ahead before the show is not going to be what they say after the show when it doesn't work. Just it's not going to, they'll say everything's going to be okay and I'm willing to take the risk. I'm willing to, but when everything goes bad, you're under the bus. So you got to do what you got to do to make sure that you're protected. Next question.
Also coming in from Jonas Duttel in Stuttgart. As a editor camera op, it's easier to show your skills with a reel. How do you do that as a producer or engineer?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think you can still show the output as sort of your reel, because even though one may be a small cog in that machine, you still help create that show. But aside from that, word from other clients, I think, is much stronger than any reel can be.
When it comes to producers and engineers, I don't know any time we've ever hired anybody from their reel. At that level, it's because someone said that you're the right person to hire for that. I mean, it isn't really about your reel anymore. So you have to get into communities to do that. Next question.
Coming in from Jason Panks in Nashville. What non-technical team members should we consider adding to our productions?
Mickey?
Craft services.
And production assistants. Like, production assistants are not expensive, and they are the grease that makes the whole thing work. Someone else that runs an errand, that goes and handles crafty, that does whatever they're gonna, that goes and holds something, that goes up and does a mic test, that does a whatever. it is it's crazy when you don't have production assistants. We have production assistants for almost everything. There's two of us. There's a production assistant somewhere because I just need someone to run an errand or stand up in front of the camera or go hold something or run, do stuff. And a good production assistant is gold. So never forget those. When you cut the budget, that's not where you cut because it's not very expensive. It's so useful. Next question.
Coming in from Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines. How critical is project management to the business? Is there a dedicated person as a PM? Tips in managing project particular to the industry?
It's everything. Project management is everything in live streaming. Everything about live streaming happens before the show, not after the show. So everything all the logistics have to be lined up. All the things have to be done. All the little details and all the little T's need to be crossed and the I's need to be dotted. So project management is the show. That's the whole thing. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, could sound design also be a marketable service along with pure stream management?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to become more and more important as we do more and more digital events. Next question.
From Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. How do you price your day rate for gear? Is it a percentage of the value of your equipment?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, we typically price our equipment at anywhere from 2 to 5% of the original acquisition cost. That would be the daily rental rate. That would depend on first the value of the equipment and also your projected lifespan of the equipment, how long it will last, or be I would say be useful in this industry. Like for example, cameras, every few months, every 6 months, there's a new camera, so you wouldn't set them that to be something that would last long, as opposed to microphones like SM58s. They're still standard after decades, and you can price those at a lower rate.
What's funny is I think that we tend to price them relatively the same 2 to 10% for us, because some things that are more fragile and have a shorter shelf life might be at 10% of the retail value, whereas 2% is something that is more hardened, that we think that will last for years. And then there are things that we actually get more for because it just doesn't make sense for us to charge. Like an SM58, charging 2% of an SM58 is not worth doing, because there's time, so you end up charging, 10% or 20% of the cost. And so just because it doesn't make sense, the math doesn't add up. So, but yeah, that's about right. All right. We pushed some back because they had low vote counts. But I think that was a great conversation. I think that I'm glad that people requested this. It's something that I wasn't sure, where it would go or what we'd look at it, but these are the kind of conversations that I wish someone would have had with me, when I got started, because a lot of us are all just trying to figure it out. And we can keep on, we'll come up and do this every once in a while, maybe once a quarter. We'll just talk about the business. If you guys request it and a lot of people vote it up, we'll do it every week. I don't care, but I'm just saying that it's a good thing to come back to at least once a quarter, where we just let people ask business questions of how do I actually get this done. So anyway, well, thank you to our producers for a great set of questions guiding us down the path, and thanks to the panelists for a great set of answers and keeping the conversation running. All right, tomorrow we're going to talk about the Belfast method. Should be very interesting. But right now we're going to jump into after hours for the next 21 hours.